Super Bowl week. Something we've all been waiting for. Seems like it's been, well, it's only been a week, but it seems like it's been a year. A lot of bets on the line. Jonathan Coachman, he joins us on Breaking Even. And we got the whole team together. Danny Moses, Guy Adami, and Dan Nathan. The show, as it's set today, we're going to talk Super Bowl. Coach is boots on the ground in Los Angeles, so he's going to give us the vibe of what's happening at the Super Bowl. I'm curious if you've been to the stadium, what's coming from each team. And then after some picks and after some banter between Danny and Coach, Rams plus tails equals 400 from Coach. We're going to just slide into some markets. I have, 15 questions lined up, so it's going to be kind of a rapid-fire affair. Welcome to Breaking Even. Coach, let's start with you, man. How is Los Angeles? How's the Super Bowl? What's the atmosphere like?
It's fantastic. And as you can imagine, because of COVID, there's a lot of extra things that you have to do. So just to rent a car, I had to show 2 forms of ID. Well, I just moved, so my addresses didn't match. That was a problem. And then going down to get our credentials, that was an issue too, but we got them. But everywhere I've gone, Ned and boys, all they've been talking about is how I got over on Danny last week on the show. And they said, how does a financial wizard get taken to the shed like that? I said, hey, we're just getting started. So that's what everybody's talking about out here.
Funny, the money line's moved in my direction now, so I look like a hero on our second bet that I made. But let's continue.
Any words from either of the camps? Injury updates or concerns, COVID concerns, or is it just business as usual for now?
Well, here's the thing, because these players and teams need to understand, because we talked about it in the college football championship was being played. These players are not going out anywhere. Because you cannot have an issue come Sunday with any COVID list, with anybody being out. So we're not getting any information from anybody because nobody's allowed to get close to them. Even down at the NFL experience, it's kind of like a half of an experience this year because of all the restrictions. So it's very difficult, but the teams are keeping it very close to the vest on what their plans are because there's a lot of different ways that this football game could go.
Hey, Coach, I was at SoFi Stadium for the Rams-Niners game. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of these restrictions you're just talking about might be optics in the lead up to the game. When I walked into SoFi Stadium, not only did no one check our vax cards, there were no masks to be seen. It literally felt like Super Bowl 2019. So it'll be interesting to see at some of the very official events how things are going. And maybe it's just a little bit of window dressing, but I think LA is open for business, man.
It certainly feels that way in some places, but I went to get sushi yesterday and they literally were shut down because somebody was working on the street in front of them. So those restrictions are coming back for restaurants. And at the NFL experience, it was like weaving in and out. But I do agree with you. I think it's going to depend on what the event is. They're having an event at Universal Studios on Friday night. I would assume that it's going to be wide open, just like any place else would be. So I think there's something to that for sure.
Danny, you mentioned the line has swayed in your direction. Besides just money going one way, any reason in particular that might be?
I think the Rams are healthy. I'm not sure the tight end status for either team at this moment, but I just think money's coming in on the favorite here a little bit. People like Coach that are out there talking about it. I think people are looking for an excuse to bet on the Rams and not the Bengals. That's inherently going towards the favorite is human behavior 101. I'm not saying that's the right move or not, but I think the line's going to end up closing closer to 5. I think we're hanging around 4.5, Coach, correct me if I'm wrong, minus 105. So we're not there yet, but I think we're going to close around 5. And I'm thinking that the totals, I think we're sitting at 48.5. Yeah, I'm kind of swaying towards Rams in the under, and we can talk about it more, but I'm thinking like a 31-13, 31-17 type game at the most. So I'm feeling good about the Rams here.
The total is always so tough, Ned, to bet on because in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, all that matters is winning. Nobody cares about how you do it. Nobody cares about how many points you score. So really the only way you get to the over is if you have a game like when the Patriots are down 28-3 to the Falcons, and then one team has to score a lot in the second half. So be very, very careful. If people want to bet the total, which is the over and under for those novice bettors, because in the Super Bowl, it doesn't really matter unless one team gets down by a lot because they're very conservative normally.
Hey, Coach, here's something I learned in my gambling days. Actually, I never gambled, but you always bet the under. Now, check this logic out, because you're a winner until you're a loser. Thought on that?
You're a winner until you're a loser, because that's what unders are. So I like that. But I'll tell you, we have a guy on my show, The Early Edge, CBS Sports Line. We call him Prop Stars. That's his Twitter handle. He's the best props bettor in the world. He tells our audience every single week, there are so many more ways for an under to hit than an over. Everything is shaded to the under, but everybody loves to bet the overs. And that's why people lose so much, because they don't want to bet the unders. So be very careful, because the unders are where the plays most of the time really are.
Can I talk about some of these prop bets, Ned?
Yeah, you've got a handful of prop bets. Let's fire a few out.
Out of these 17 pages, I picked a select few. I want to get Coach's thoughts. In the Kansas City-Cincinnati game, if Burrow had gone down one time on any of those key plays in the second half, he was a hair away from going down. The Chiefs would have won that game, because those plays he turned into winning positive plays. It wasn't just throwing the ball away. He was throwing the ball downfield. That's kind of my backdrop to all this. I believe he's going to be dumping the ball off a lot to Joe Mixon. Mixon over 3.5 receptions, minus 160, I love. Mixon over 26.5 receiving yards, minus 110, I love. And that's because I think that's the way the game's going to set up. He's going to have to get rid of the ball early, and I think it's going to be a lot of dumping over the middle. Coach, before I continue, what are your thoughts on those?
Hate them both. And here's why. Because they showed the last couple of games, there's a name that nobody's talking about. We actually gave this out as a best bet on today's show. Samaje P. Ryan. He's the backup running back for the Bengals. When they need to throw it, they bring him into the game now because he's a much better receiver. Who scored the first touchdown for the Bengals last week when they were down 21-3? Samaje P. Ryan, 41 yards to the house. And so we believe that this week the game script is going to be when they need to run, Joe Mixon's in the game, and when they really need to move it, 2-minute drill, second half if they're behind, that it's going to be Samaje P. Ryan. So getting Mixon to 4 catches is going to be hard, and the juice is so high, I don't think it's worth the squeeze.
I know Danny's got some more of these, Coach, but I'm going to jump in. There's no way on God's green earth that the Bengals are going to let Cooper Kupp beat them. It's just not going to happen. So does that mean that OBJ, who, by the way, was on the trash heap a year and a half ago, is going to have a monster game?
Both. I used to be in your camp that surely every team's going to figure out how to stop Cooper Kupp. He is unstoppable. Last week he had 11 catches, well over 100 yards, as did OBJ. Both guys are going to be terrific. I don't think Cooper Kupp can be stopped, and I don't think his numbers can be bet high enough. The last time I looked, it was over 8.5, and his number was like 105. Those are ridiculous in the history of prop bets to have a player with those numbers that high in the Super Bowl. So, unfortunately, he figures out a way every single week to get the job done. But OBJ's numbers are numbers that you can play with. We love OBJ this week.
So you're saying you can't bet Cooper Kupp just because the numbers are so high?
He has to get to 9 catches to cash that ticket. Think about that. How many players get 9 catches in a game? Hardly ever.
I have an answer to that. So I hate OBJ. I've always hated him, but I fell in love with him 4 or 5 weeks ago when he started coming into his own. He's playing for a contract. He's never looked better since his one-handed catch on your crappy Giants team years ago there, guy. But listen to this. OBJ to be MVP. Now, I know it's a long shot. He's 28-1 to be MVP. I know receivers, they've gotten it in the past. They don't always get it. But let's just say that Stafford has an even distribution game of 275 and 4 touchdowns, whatever. He probably gets it. That's why he's minus 105 or something to be MVP, because basically you're just betting the Rams and getting a little bit less, and you're paying a little bit less to do it. But 28-1 to be MVP. Kupp is 5-1. But here's some OBJ bets. Over 5.5. Again, I don't understand. He's been 4.5 the last few weeks. He's up to 5.5 receptions. That's plus 110. I love that. Over 64.5 yards, minus 110. Love that. So I think he's going to have another huge game. And he's the reason I think they win the Super Bowl, actually. So I just wanted to throw those props in. Coach, what do you think of those?
Love him, love him, love him. His numbers have basically been 4.5 and in the 50s for most of the playoffs, and he has blown past all those numbers for every single game. And we have learned and we have seen that quarterbacks, when they get into the playoffs, the higher the emotion, the higher the stress, the higher the pressure, they go to players that they feel comfortable with. And Matthew Stafford loves Cooper Kupp, and now he's fallen in love with OBJ. So I love both of those to go to the over.
What about on the Bengals side? What are you looking at there, Coach?
Jamar Chase is the guy, but came out that Jalen Ramsey, who's the best defensive back for the Rams, has says, I want him. I want to go one-on-one with him all day long. If that's the case, that could be pretty exciting. But Chase has proven that no matter what it is, he can get to 5 or 6 catches. He can go north of 150 as well. He is dynamic. But what we love is the longest reception, because if you don't feel comfortable getting to 5 catches, a lot of times Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, OBJ, they run deep routes. They run 20-plus yard routes. So you can make bets on longest catch, longest reception over 27.5, over 28.5. Sometimes look at those instead of the catches because a lot of those guys are going deep downfield.
I got two crazy ones, Coach, and I know you guys want to move on, but you can bet on the exact score, which I know is a ridiculous thing, but it's amazing how many times bookies get it right. They get the totals right. They get the total points right. You realize that the Rams to win 27-23, which is basically what the line is telling you, minus 1.5 on the over, is 85-1. Now, I feel like those are the ones you throw $5-10 at. And the other ones, 31-13 and 31-17, one's 120-1, the other one's 150-1. I don't know. Just makes the game exciting throughout, but it's just amazing that you're getting 85-1 on basically what the bookies are telling you.
Did you see the guy? There was one guy who successfully parlayed the exact score of the NFC and the AFC at plus 29,000.
Saw that.
$500,000. Crazy. So it's definitely worth a $5 bet or $10 bet.
Hey, Coach, that kid, it was a kid, and he actually goes to my daughter's high school in Connecticut, which is pretty amazing. Kid who did it through his dad, $579,000.
You just outed him, by the way. You got to be 21?
He did it through his dad.
Oh, he ruined the dad. Oh, okay.
Well, listen, if you guys saw the kid's TikTok and his Snapchat, he's acting like he just literally won the Super Bowl MVP. So he outed himself.
Fair enough.
In a related story, a young kid in Connecticut just sued his father for $500,000.
Quick note on the Jamar Chase going up against Jalen Ramsey. Mike Evans got the better of Jalen Ramsey a little bit when they played the Bucs earlier in the playoffs. So if I have to put money on either one of those, Jamar Chase, maybe not the length of reception, but I like the number of receptions. I think Jalen Ramsey is great, maybe not as good as he thinks he is.
One thing to keep in mind, that the referee crew calls a lot of penalties. And so if you are one of those, that they could be a lot of defensive penalties, a lot of holding calls. This is what this referee crew is known for. So that could take away some of the yardage. That could take away some of the catches as well.
Were any of those referees in Vegas in the last couple of days? I'm just curious if they stopped there on the way, Coach.
Yeah, a lot of things happen.
Coach, I was going over some prop bets last night and I just printed out a document. And, of course, my kids and my wife landed on some of the halftime bets. And I know this is not exactly where you spend your time and energy, but it amazes me that you can bet on the artist to first perform in the halftime show. And what will Eminem's first song be? And will there be a collaboration between all 5 artists? And they actually have odds on these things. Do people actually bet these things? It sounds like a great way to lose your ass.
100% they do. Not necessarily sucker bets, but these are bets that you can figure out the answers to. Much like the national anthem. A few years ago, Carrie Underwood was at a party. Everybody kept asking her, how long is it going to take you to sing tomorrow? She's like, I don't know, 2 minutes? They're like, no, we need the exact number. And these type of bets, they're going to practice at some point in SoFi Stadium. We used to do this when we tried to do WrestleMania things and surprise the audience. You've got to practice. You got to have sound checks. Somebody's going to be out there singing, and you don't think there's a security guard somewhere that's going to be watching that. So if you want to bet on that, you're going to have to bet on it probably Friday or Saturday, or they're going to bring the limits so far down that you can only bet like $25 because once they do the rehearsals, then the information is going to be out there, and then you can't bet big on it.
Ned, normally in those situations, I think Coach would agree, 99% of the time, it's the one with the least odds. So the minus 300 of what songs are, because it's pretty much choreographed to Coach's point. So you're not really fooling anybody. There's really no edge. I only always bet the heavy favorite in those things if you're going to do something like that.
Hey, before we move on to some of the markets, Coach and Danny, actually, what are maybe an exclusive pick for us here on Breaking Even? Something that you're only going to give our audience, a bet that you like. Again, we are recording Tuesday, so things can change, but throw me some exclusivity here.
I've got 2 for you because I'm done fighting the Cooper Kupp train. So I'm going to give you Cooper Kupp, not his receptions, not his yardage. I'm going to go longest reception over 28.5 yards. Every single game, as the game moves on, he tends to get deeper and deeper and deeper, and then has one of those 30, 40-yard catches exactly when he needs them. This is going to cash. And also, the Bengals have the best kicker in football. Over 1.5 field goals for Evan McPherson is a lock because of the Rams' defense and the fact they'll be able to stop them inside the red zone, inside the 30 or 40. This dude can make kicks from 65 or 70 yards. That's how good he is. So play those 2, and I promise you, I'll meet you at the pay window.
Ooh, I like the sounds of that. Yeah, that McPherson's buried, 3 kicks over 50 yards already. One that took the Titans down. Danny, do you have a favorite bet that you're eyeing right now?
I like the under in the first quarter. I don't know what it is, Coach. What is it right now?
I didn't look at it today, but it's usually in between 8 and 10. But I love that too. We also made a play, Danny, that first play of the game is a running play because they're very conservative. You can bet on that too.
Interesting. There's a lot of interesting stuff like, will the game be tight? I just think this game's going to be Rams open up on a long drive like they kind of did against the Niners. But unlike the last game, I think they keep control, and I think their defense controls the rest of the game. So I'm liking the Rams all the way through. But I do like the under in the first quarter because I think they're going to chew up a lot of the clock on the first drive.
Coach, you are going to be busy all week. Where can we follow you?
We're actually live on CBS Sports HQ all week. This is really cool for us. Also, our YouTube page is incredibly popular. We're on every digital platform also that CBS has. Our show is live every morning at 11 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. And then later today, on Tuesday, we're recording this, we have a Props 1 hour special that we're doing, airing on CBS Sports HQ. And then also Thursday, our final mega preview is also at 5:30 Eastern time. So if people get CBS Sports HQ, we'll be there all week.
Danny, you need to send your 17 pages of prop bets over to Coach to see if they align with what he and his team think.
Yeah, sounds like Coach and I may have some. I'm going to listen to that, Coach, and then whatever I disagree with you, we're going to have some more action on the side, so get ready.
I love it.
Hey, speaking of disagreeing and being confused, Coach, feel free to stick around and be part of this conversation as we slide our way into the markets. There is some dissension among the ranks, Guy Adami, on what oil and OIH are going to do. If you have Carter Braxton Worth and look at his charts, he's saying it's going to pull back. He doesn't see OIH doing anything particularly special. You're saying, hey, I think maybe a little bit of a pullback and then oil to 100. I'm very confused. Straighten me out.
Last time we talked, I think the OIH was trading either side of 235, and we had the conversation, look, if you've enjoyed this run from 175, the right thing to do is to take some money off the table. I can understand why you would do that. I still think oil grinds higher. Now we're in an environment where there's seemingly a bit of a détente in terms of things that are going on in Europe, Russia, Ukraine. Apparently, Russia's now looking for an elegant way out. We'll see if that comes to fruition, and oil's pulled back a little bit. So the OIH, which again topped out at 235, seems to be faltering here. You're at the top end of the range. I will tell you, I'm going to stick by this. I still think oil goes significantly higher. And when I say significantly higher, well north of $100. And I think the OIH has potential to get to 280 sometime this year. But I can understand why people are getting a little antsy at these levels, Ned.
And there was some speculation that OIH, if oil did hit 100, would get to 300 and 300 plus. Is that still possible, or you think?
Never happening. It would literally have to be World War III for that to happen, Ned. And the dissension in the ranks, I mean, Guy and I often disagree on stuff, and I think we like to lay out some pretty decent reasons for our views here. I was kind of fading this oil move, especially in the equities. Danny, help me out here. When's the last time it made a whole heck of a lot of sense to bet on oil stocks at multi-year highs? I'm looking at the large integrateds. The XLE is the ETF that tracks. Exxon and Chevron make up over 40% of the weight of that. I'm just not a fan. I know the guy has played the OIH, the oil services, where there's a bit more beta, and those have been a great trading vehicle over the last year. Look at the moves that we've seen. We've seen a number of bounces from 170 to 230, then back to 170, then back up to 225. And here we are back at 230 after we were just trading in the low 170s in December. So great trading vehicle. If you look at it as where it is relative to its 5-year highs, you see that something's broken in these stocks, in my personal opinion. So I'm just not betting for a breakout here. Guy's got some very good reasons why he thinks oil's harder. He's much smarter than I. He was trading it back in the 70s during the OPEC issues. And
something's got to give, right? Either the stocks are going to catch up to where oil is, or oil's going to start to come down, or maybe they just eat in the middle here. So it's probably overweighted now by several funds. Probably not there completely yet, but people have jumped on this train. It's been a safe place to play. When you see what oil prices are doing, you can feel good about owning the energy stocks. You had Chevron and Exxon come out with incredible quarters. They're not only incredible quarters, they're buying back stock, they're increasing their dividends. So it's checking the box of flight to safety, ironically, here. And with the Ukraine-Russia stuff, certainly that elevated it. If that calms down like it looks like it might be walked back, certainly oil is at risk. Carter Braxton Worth pointed out the other day after making a great call, as you just mentioned, on being long oil. He says it's absolutely time to take some chips on the table. He sees the price receding. However, you can have the price recede without these oil stocks trading down. Because again, I don't think they've caught up to where oil prices are. No one's using $90 oil in 2022, 23, and 24 earnings for any of these companies. That's kind of what I would say.
You know, Ned, Dan makes fun of me, but just I have an advantage in the oil space because J. Paul Getty and I spent time at Oxford together back in the day. So, you know, I'm very well versed in the Texas tea, as they say.
Wait. So you and Jake Paul spent time in.
Just so you know, Coach, guy has no idea who Jake Paul is. You could put a gun to his head right now, could not tell you who Jake Paul is.
Sure you can. Guy, you have to know who Jake Paul is.
Yeah, no, I know who he is. I have all his albums. I think he's an incredible influence on my life.
No, it's the JP of JP Morgan guy. You got it wrong.
I will give you $100 right now if you can tell me who Jake Paul just fought.
Jake Paul just fought Jake LaMotta, and I have no idea who Jake Paul is. Come on, Coach.
He is one of the biggest YouTube stars in the world, and now he started a boxing promotion. He just fought Tyron Woodley, and he is going head up against the UFC on social media.
And one of the founders of Instabet, which was a spun out of SimpleBet, so he's crushing it. He's done some great stuff. He's with 305 Ventures. He's doing some venture capital stuff. So at least he's using his brain for something other than getting hit.
Is he the same Paul that bought Pokemon cards for $2.5 million that turned out to be fake? Or was that Logan Paul?
Yeah, the brothers are kind of one and the same.
Moral of that story is don't buy Pokemon cards online, guy. Maybe don't buy Facebook or Google either. I want to put this into the whole NASDAQ complex in the sense of the conversation of, is 225 really in play for Facebook? Is 2750 really in play for Google? And if so, looking at the NASDAQ again, watching the market calls that you all have been doing, Carter Braxton Worth and his charts, he's talking about the IWM and he's talking about the NASDAQ with the possibility of really rolling over. So offer your thoughts on that. And then how do we play it? What do we do?
Well, Ned, as we're doing this on Tuesday, Facebook made another 52-week low today. It continues to do that seemingly every day for the last week since earnings of 219 and change. And there really doesn't seem to be a floor right now for the name. I thought it would find a home basically around 250 or so on capitulation selling, given that the stock had made an all-time high back in August, but it's not finding it now. What I will tell you, and Dan will echo this, you saw a very similar price action in the summer of 2018 when the stock had made a then all-time high of about 235, literally into Christmas Eve of that year when it bottomed out around 104 or thereabouts. And this move is mirroring that, so we'll see. I have not seen any indication that it's over. And Dan has some thoughts on both that and Google as well, which, by the way, has really traded poorly since earnings.
It's interesting when Facebook, a lot of people are saying, we got a 30% peak to trough decline in just a week or so since that bad fundamental news, which was, as Guy said, very similar to the setup that you had in 2018, and it went lower for months. And so sometimes when you see an overshoot to the upside, you'll see that to the downside. I would just mention that this time around, this is not happening from an all-time high. The stock traded $384 in September. When it gapped lower just last week, the stock was trading down 20% from those highs. So to me, I think you probably see lower lows. You probably see this stock near 200. I do think you're going to see a lot of individual investors and institutions load the boat at some point in the not so distant future. The one that's more interesting to me, if you're trying to figure out the course of the NASDAQ in the next few weeks or the next couple of months, is Alphabet. When the market was in a free fall just a couple weeks ago, Apple, Microsoft, $5 trillion in combined market cap. Those two companies make up, 15% of the S&P 500, believe it or not, of the weight. And then Alphabet the next week, they all put up good quarters and guidance. The stocks traded well, and that put a little near-term floor in the market. Here's the deal. Alphabet, which is the ticker GOOGL. You know it as Google, people. That stock gapped up 8.5% to a new all-time high. It was the first mega cap company to make a new all-time high in what was clearly a market correction. It's given it all back in the last week. It's filled in the gap, as we say. That is super bearish to me, which makes me believe that keep an eye on Microsoft, keep an eye on Apple. If there's any reason for those to go lower in the next couple weeks, couple months, you're going to see new lows in the NASDAQ.
Danny, you talked about the generals selling off. Have they sold off yet using Google, Facebook, Apple, and especially Tesla? You really honed in on Tesla. You said you wouldn't believe the sell-off was complete until Tesla had been sold off. Are we there yet?
No, we're not there by a long shot. But I want to say, Dan's been talking about the generals being shot. There's been a few generals that have been shot on the battlefield here. And what's interesting is that Amazon, I believe, really saved the NASDAQ or the Qs, if you want to say near term. $1.6 trillion company, I think, Dan, or something at this point. I don't know exactly what the market cap is on that. That was a lot of market cap that came back into the market on a 15% move. That's massive. You're seeing people now stock pick a little bit more, right? It's not about owning the Qs. It's about, I want to own the Amazons of the world. I don't want to own Facebook. So I think we're seeing more of that go on throughout the year. I think that will continue. I don't think we're in the clear by a long shot. And I think Tesla, I've always said, being the original meme stock, it does not trade on fundamentals. It's one of those few top 4 or 5 that does not trade on fundamentals. And Facebook right now at a 16 or 17 PE is telling you it's not a buy the dip. What is it? It's telling you there's something potentially structurally wrong with the company. It's telling you that they're losing market share, that they're losing daily active users, that people have turned them off. I think that's what it's telling you. And that's much more disturbing to me than trying to figure out if the stock's a buy at 225, 200, or 180. It's going to have its price at some point and it will level out here, but I think it deserves a deeper look here. And I think we're seeing investors discern now between names that they own. It's not just about owning the ETF itself.
So, Guy, you said earlier in one of the market calls, I think yesterday, that you had concerns about the NASDAQ. You said you thought this one could roll over. So do we go buy puts? And if we do, where are we buying? What levels are we looking at?
That's obviously a tough game, and you did well with your put trade, really well. Congratulations on that. But I still think, Ned, there's about a 15% more room on the downside in terms of the NDX and in terms of some of the names that make it up. So you can start to figure out what that means in terms of levels. I don't have it in front of me necessarily, but draw a line 15% from here. I think that's where we're going. That's not a popular position. I just don't think this is over. I don't think we've done enough work on the downside to flush the system out, especially when you have rates continuing to go higher. As we're sitting here, Ned, you have 10-year yields approaching 2%.
So when we look then at, say, a company like NVIDIA, they have earnings coming up. The ARMS deal just today has been announced. It's a great company, but Dan, is it overvalued? Can it live up to its valuation, or is this something that also maybe goes the way of Google? Or is it an Amazon and it saves some of the market perhaps?
NVIDIA traded nearly 350 late November. Here we are trading about 250, so down $100. You can do the math on that. This is a company which was $750 billion market cap at its highs, and we throw those numbers out. That's one of the largest companies in the market, just to be very clear. You hear a lot of investors talk about valuation. They talked about PEs, price to earnings. So if I told you that the stock NVIDIA is trading about a 50 PE, you can't even understand how expensive that is on a price to earnings basis for most stocks in semiconductors or hardware within tech. It's one thing if you're a high growth internet or software company or something like that. So it trades at a 50 PE and it trades about 20 times its sales. Now, just so you know, the average PE on the S&P 500 over the last 10 years is about 19 and a half times. So it's trading at a multiple of its sales. It's just ridiculous. It makes absolutely no sense. But here's the thing. What we try to differentiate, this is a great company. And it's not on the company that the stock is trading at this valuation. It's on investors, the people who are pulling the trigger, who are buying it. And so what we try to do is demystify a little bit. We're saying when it ramped up and gave $200 billion in market cap in a matter of months, that's not on the company. That's not on Wall Street. That's on the investors who are willing to pay for it. So right now, even after being down 25% or so, it's still a very expensive stock. And for it to grow into that valuation, it's going to have to do almost everything right in a very high growth and competitive industry that also doesn't have great visibility right now because of all these supply chain issues. So to me, might you see a pop back to 300 on better than expected earnings? Yeah, but I would expect to see sellers lean into this sort of stuff, lean into the strength. I know Danny's been saying that too, and that's exactly what we saw in Alphabet last week.
All right, so I want to throw this out there, and Coach, you can weigh in on this one too, because I had a couple of people this week. I said, what do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to hear from the guys? And he said, I had a Ameritrade account that I haven't really been paying attention to. And when I looked at it the other day, it was down over 60% because he was into Lemonade and Snowflake and a bunch of these high growth stories that were great during COVID. And so now he's sitting there saying, well, what do I do? So, Coach, it'd be like somebody who made some bets but hadn't been paying attention, and now they're basically all losers. So he's basically asking, do I sell all these losers and then put this money towards something else, or do I just sell them and go to cash, or do I just hang in there and wait and hopefully over the next year these come back? So talk to me about what we do with this set of massive losers.
Well, first of all, I don't know what he or she was doing, not looking at his or her statement all this time. I mean, obviously, he was. They were under this misguided belief that stocks never go lower and something like this can't happen. So I would tell him, listen, you just paid for a huge education, and if you want to get involved in this in a meaningful way, now at least you learn lesson number one. But there's an old sports gambling adage, Coach, and you can speak to this: don't chase bad money with good money. And I think that's exactly what's about to happen here. Not that these are not good companies. They're all great companies. They just traded at levels which they should have never been at if you think about it in retrospect. And I'm hard-pressed to believe they can get anywhere close to where they were. So what do you do now? Well, you learn your lesson, number one, and I think you look for an opportunity to sort of pare these things down and reevaluate why you're in these names in the first place.
It's kind of like hedging your bet, so to speak, right, guys? That unfortunately, when you make a futures bet, you can't change it. You have to sit there, and it's going to sit in your account until that game is played or until the league season is over. At least here, you can hedge it, which is something you can do with a futures bet, where if you know it's going to be a loser and something comes up, either to lose less or to make it up. But, guy's point, you don't want to chase that losing bet with another losing bet that has high numbers just to try to get that back. It's a grind. And whether you're talking about finance or sports betting, it's a 365 business. And the hardest thing to remember is that you do it 7 days a week, not 5. It's a 7-day-a-week business.
Danny, you're shaking your head.
Well, in the case of this person, the reason I'm shaking my head, Coach, is because I have these conversations all the time, and you can tell people what you believe, but if they don't want to hear it, they're not going to do anything. And what this person should do is sell those stocks, because in this type of environment, what's going to recover and stay stable are not those. Those things are in motion now. If you have bad fundamentals and bad sponsorship, so to speak, from the ownership community, meaning institutions, which is really what you need, you got to think to yourself, what are quality mutual funds and quality funds going to be looking to buy? And it's not those. And so without looking at valuations of certain names, a lot of technicals in play, where a company went public versus where it's trading, did it hold that, all the other stuff which people aren't sophisticated probably enough to look at. I sell those, I raise cash, and I buy quality into the.
Wow, I didn't know that we needed an actual platform to shut Danny up. That's fantastic.
And I was going to say, did you guys catch that? Maybe not sophisticated enough. I love that. Danny just getting all high-minded Wall Street on her asses here.
I love it. And Guy, you asked the question of what the hell were you doing not paying attention? Even if it's $20, if you place a bet, I'm watching it. If I buy a stock I'm watching it.
It's the cheapest thing you can do. Pay attention, Coach. See that? You learned something here on Breaking Even with Ned Michaels.
I learned so much here on Breaking Even with Ned Michaels. Shockingly so.
All right, so 2 quick questions for you. One, there's something that I was involved in, and Guy, you and I have talked about this a long time ago, TRBCX. It's basically a blue chip growth fund, but it's down like 30%, and it's got all the usual suspects that you would think are in it. It's kind of one of those things, again, it's do you hang on? Do you sell? Do you hedge against it? Because it's down 30%, but if it's got Alphabet and it has Facebook and it has Netflix, these things, by the sounds of it, can continue to go down, much to my chagrin.
Yeah, and I think if memory serves, it's a T. Rowe Price blue chip growth fund, which I think made an all-time high of about 205 late last year, and it's probably trading around 150 or so there for all the reasons that we've been talking about and you just mentioned. But if you look at this, if you just want to play in terms of technicals, back in September, this is where that fund took off from, this 150 level. So it stands to reason this is where we should bottom out at. So in terms of entry level, this makes sense. So I will tell you, I wouldn't be selling out of it here. Obviously, that opportunity has come and gone, and that's not playing Monday morning quarterback. I think this is more a level to get into it more, in my opinion.
I like that. Coach, see, that's what we're talking about. Try to educate us a little bit. Gold. I know that some of us love it, some of us don't. Coach, you're in Los Angeles where there's a lot of gold. There was a certain bet at some point between Danny and Dan who was going to hit 1,700, who was going to hit 1,900. Can we just get an update on that?
Yeah, we're sitting at 1825. Coach doesn't have to figure out those odds on an equal weighted basis, so I'm looking pretty good. But I will say this, I think that Bitcoin did not really perform in a, quote, inflationary surge that we kind of saw. I think that was one reason that people bought a little bit of gold. The other is stuff in the Ukraine. And the other is what I believe, which is that the Fed's going to either overshoot, stop, and this inflation, and they'll actually be potentially what people will perceive adding liquidity or taking less liquidity out of the market than we had thought. So I like the setup here. I think it still works. I think Dan's going to be down another 5 dimes. But Dan, what do you got?
People have been pounding the table on gold for as long as I've been in the business, and there's just been a couple of short-term periods where it's actually worked. That's just a fact. Just look at the chart over the last 10, 15 years or so. So to me, you get these spikes in these very volatile, uncertain periods, and then it comes down. And I know that from mid-2018, you had that low down there at 1,200, and it got as high to the all-time highs, a new all-time high above 2000 in the throes of the pandemic this summer of 2020. But what has it done? It came in really hard back to about 1700, and it's consolidated for months and months and months. And there's little spikes. It picks its head up a little bit, then it gets bitch slapped down. I just feel like near term, I was willing to get on your train with you and Guy to find my risk. I'm doing it through call spreads. But if it cannot rally in this environment with expectations for inflation to be running hot at 40-year highs, it will get destroyed in the next few months if we start to see lower inflation readings.
You want to buy out, Dan? You can buy out if you want.
We lost Danny again. And Coach, just let me give you a little, Dan mentioned trains there. I know you have no idea of what I'm talking about now, the way I had no idea who Jake Ruffian was. Who do you mean? But I will tell you, the greatest harmonica in rock history is on the song Train, Train by Blackfoot. I encourage you to go to your local Tower Records and buy the album.
Hey, the Tower building is just right down the street here. But I need to jump in, Ned, because Danny, shockingly again, he reminded me of a question that I needed to ask the guys. And this is why I love doing this show together. We have a ton of fun, but we also learn something. So out here, the big topic, when you bring up Bitcoin, I said, okay. You realize that Crypto.com, they just paid $700 million for the right to name the Staples Center, now Crypto.com Arena. It's like a 20-year deal. What would you guys say the odds are they fulfill that contract?
Dan has some thoughts on this. Let me tell you, Coach, I know where you're going with this. Throughout history, at least the last 20 years or so, companies that have named stadiums within 18 months to 2 years, it didn't work out all that well for them. Obviously, everybody thinks of Enron, but there are a lot of others as well. So my sense is, and this is just me, 2 years from now or something, we're going to be talking about, remember when Crypto.com had the naming rights? They top-ticked the entire thing. Dan?
Yeah, well, I would just say the good thing they didn't call it Bitcoin.com, because at least they've given themselves a little leeway to make it out past one crypto asset, if you will. But that's a great point. I mean, listen, time will tell. Just today, as we're looking at this, there was a Wall Street Journal headline that the U.S. government seized $3.6 billion in Bitcoin from a hack from 5 years ago. And I think there's a lot of people who just get hung up on a lot of these nefarious uses for crypto right now. And I think we're at the very early stages of seeing this sort of innovation, but I do think it's going to broaden out away from Bitcoin. Your point's a really good one, because Crypto.com is an exchange. We see those come and go, if you will. So I'm with you. I'm taking the under. You just tell me what the under is, and I'm taking it with you there, Coach.
Let's set the, what is it, 2.5 years? I'd take the under.
I like that. Let's go 2.5 years. Yeah. It was crazy because they paid 7 times what Staples played 20 years ago. It's like the dumbest deal ever.
Maybe more like 2 years then. That's ridiculous.
There you go.
Who's going to win the Super Bowl? And give me a score. Guy, you're up.
I've liked the Rams since week 7, week 8 of the season. I love what the Bengals are doing, but I think what we learned in that last game is the Bengals are vulnerable up front. I think the Rams will take advantage of that. I think it'll be a good game. I think it'll be a late cover for the Rams. I think going 35-24, Coach.
I think sometimes there are certain athletes that are just born to be special. And I think that, 40 years ago, guys, that Joe Cool was the guy in New York City, that Joe Namath was the guy. We've got a new Joe Cool, and his name is Joe Burrow. And he won the Heisman Trophy. He won the national championship. And now he's going to win his first Super Bowl in year number 2, 28-24. Won't even need the 4 points. And I will cash the ticket. I'll collect from Danny, which will be the first of many, many times I do that on this show. Dan?
All right, I'm going to do Rams 21-17 in a push.
I am going Bengals straight up 31-28. I'm with you, Coach. I think this Joe Burrow is something special. And as I said in the last episode of Breaking Even, it is the year of the Tiger. So I'm sticking with it. Bengals 31-28.
By the way, tell all the beautiful people at home that starting next week, the show's going to look completely different.
It's going to have a similar format to it. It's going to be fast-paced. We're going to start with the betting, mix in some golf. All sports now are on the plate, on the menu. Anything is free game. And then we're going to transition our way into the markets. What we really want to have is intertwined conversation that can bounce back and forth. And we're going to be able to eventually hopefully do some live stuff, maybe even some remote on location type of conferences. So a lot of stuff coming for Breaking Even and Risk Reversal. I think that'll do it for now, though. Wish Danny the best wherever he is. We'll talk to y'all next week.